Welcome, everyone. Very glad you are coming in. We are here at the Roots Action Education Fund Book Club for June. We do this on the evening of the first Wednesday of every month. If you go to teachinnetwork.org/book clubs, you can see all the upcoming book clubs and get the books and read them ahead of time. We are recording this program, and I will be asking our guest the questions that you put into the chat. And no question is too big or small or stupid or smart. Put all your questions in the chat based on what you read in the book or based on what we talk about, whether or not you've read the book yet. We are very privileged to have with us this evening Les Leopold, who is the co-founder and executive director of the Labor Institute. And hopefully we will have time to talk about what that is. His books include Wall Street's War on Workers, How Mass Layoffs and Greed Are Destroying the Working Class and What to Do About It, Runaway Inequality, An Activist's Guide to Economic Justice, How to Make $1 Million an Hour, Why Financial Elites Get Away with Siphoning Off America's Wealth, The Looting of America, How Wall Street's Game of Fantasy Finance Destroyed Our Jobs, Pensions, and Prosperity, and What You Can Do About It, The Man Who Hated Work and Loved Labor, The Life and Times of Tony Mazzocchi, and the book that we are here for, The Billionaires Have Two Parties. We Need a Party of Our Own. And I look forward to taking your questions from the chat and asking them of Les Leopold. But let's just start, Les, with what is the basic thesis of this book for those who haven't read it or maybe read it too long ago? What's the basic theme here?
The basic theme is that people who live in industrial areas and former industrial areas want a new political organization, a new political party. And they want one that it would be very, very progressive, populist progressive on economic issues. And a sub-theme is voters are probably ahead of us, that many of us have a mistaken notion of what people want and worry about them being racist, sexist, MAGA, etc., and think they're voting against their interests, etc. In fact, they're withdrawing from both political parties and they want something new. I was stunned, absolutely stunned, when I came across this in a survey we did a year ago, basically. It was testing out some various policies. It was a YouGov survey. It was large, 3,000 voters in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin, swing states. And 3,000 is a large survey. And there was a little space left at the end of the survey. And I made up a new organization called the Independent Workers Political Association. And this was the question. Allow me to read it to you because I think it explains why this book came into being. Here's what the question was. Would you support a new organization, the Independent Workers Political Association, that would support working class issues independent of both the Democrat and Republican parties? It would run and support independent political candidates committed to a platform that included, catch this then, stop big companies that receive tax dollars from laying off workers who pay taxes. 2, guarantee everyone who wants to work a decent paying job. If the private sector can't provide it, the government will. 3, raise the minimum wage so every family can lead a decent life. And 4, stop drug company price gouging and put price controls on food cartels. So we threw that into the survey. If you would have asked me what I expected, 20% maybe, 15, 20, maybe 25. Here are the results. 57% of the voters in these 4 states supported that new organization that doesn't exist. And it was within a percentage in all the states, like went from a high of 58 to a low of 56, right across the board. 40% of the voters who voted for Trump in 2024 supported this proposition. And this was the real stunning one. Of those 30 and under, 70% supported this idea. So I just had to write it up. We have to share this information because something's going on out there, and it needs to be worked with, captured. It's just a political vacuum that's not being filled. So the purpose of this book was to help fill that vacuum.
I'm as pleased as you, but I'm less shocked. I think people generally want something different. They're sick and tired and fed up. And I bet if you'd surveyed non-voters, you would have gotten even better results because they're not voting for a reason, right?
Good point. There was a way for people to say whether they voted or not as well. And it was pretty much the same, but it was a small number. So you're right. We didn't really dive into that area. But the fact that it was really remarkably gradated by age. The older voters, my peers, were much less interested in something new. The younger voters, overwhelmingly so. 70 and what was remarkable to me, there were so many remarkable things that came up. The fact that people would support for the government is very low, right? As you well know, it's gone down from do you trust the government? It's gone down from like 77% in 1964 to like 23% now. And yet a platform that featured the government being the employer of last resort didn't turn people off. So they support that idea. So there's something going on here that just defies. Maybe I'm just behind the curve here. You might be more in tune with it, but I just expected a whole lot more resistance. It turns out now I found other poll data that the right to a job, employer of last resort, the government employer of last resort, is actually polled well for the last 10 years or so. It's really been popular. And what's amazing is, of course, neither political party goes anywhere near that idea. The idea of creating jobs for people who are having trouble finding them is just not discussed anymore. That was the mainstay of the Democratic Party from the New Deal all the way, actually, through the Carter years. You have a recession, you try to create jobs, make sure people have them. But job insecurity is so deep that people want some. You can't live in this society unless you have a job. And if you don't have a stable job, you're in trouble. It's hard to live. It's hard to support a family. It's hard to not keep living from paycheck to paycheck. Anyway,
Isn't
that's what turned me on.
Les Leopold, isn't there a resolution on the books called something like Humphrey Hawkins that
Yeah,
commits the
right.
government to full employment? That doesn't not
Yeah. Well,
employer of last resort, but we're going to try for full employment, and they just don't, right?
yeah, and that's what's supposed to be the purpose of the Federal Reserve. And see, the other thing that that I realized in working on this is there's two models of the economy that are in competition with each other, and the dominant one is capital centric. So the way to create jobs is to encourage corporations to produce jobs through public-private partnerships, loans, incentives, tax breaks, et cetera. The other way to view it is people-centric and saying, okay, people need work. If the private sector can't produce it, we're going to produce it because there's plenty that needs to be done. I'll give you an incredible example of both alienation from the Democratic Party and job creation. So when I was working on my last book, I came up with this association between job loss and the decline of the Democratic Party vote. So I wanted to find what county in the United States lost the most coal jobs and what happened to the Democratic Party vote. And it turns out the winner of this contest was this tiny county in West Virginia called Mingo County, population 25,000, now used to be 30,000. It went from 3,300 coal jobs in 1996 to 300 in 2020, lost 3,000 coal jobs. The Democratic Party vote went 70% for Bill Clinton, down to 13% for Biden, 12% for Kamala Harris. And so if you want to blame racism for that, Obama got 42%. He got 3 times as many votes as Biden did. But the job crash there was severe. So here's where the new phase of this. It ended up in my new book as well, because the Biden administration noticed that there was a problem. This is one of the poorest counties. It may be the poor. CNN said it's the poorest county in the whole United States. It has an incredibly rich history of the coal wars and Mother Jones and the United Mine Workers Organizing, and it was occupied by federal and state troops. There was literally 10,000 guns were confiscated. It was a major battle zone, and it went Democratic when the New Deal came in, legalized unions, and life became much, much better there. But it got poor again when it lost all these jobs. So the Biden administration offered loans to a company that was going to come in and build a ammonia fertilizer green type plant factory. Going to hire 2,000 construction workers right off the bat. So this was offered up, and these loans were put forward in 2023. Well, the company hemmed and hawed and then went through its calculations again and decided not to start construction. It still hasn't started construction, and it's probably never going to start construction. So what you have here is an attempt to try to produce jobs, but fearing direct production of jobs. So, for example, this area needs many, many mines reclamated. The streams have to be cleaned up. The roads need to be repaired. There needs to be internet put in. It could use a college campus. It could use a whole lot of things. You know what it got during the last 20 years? It became the opioid capital of Appalachia. That's what free enterprise brought to these two drugstores started competing with each other, putting out a prescription per minute. So this is what the two parties, and since the Democratic Party was the primary party in 1996, it did nothing to actually create jobs. Instead, it became the opioid capital, prescription capital of a 5-state area. And going back to the idea that a responsible government makes sure all its people are working is a notion that we've forgotten. The era of big government's over, said Bill Clinton. And since then, very few Democrats, not named Bernie or AOC, have had the nerve to call for full employment by creating jobs, as opposed to waiting for the private sector to maybe create them or maybe not create them.
But the US government does create directly hundreds of thousands of jobs through a thing that it calls the US military, and almost directly, many, many more through things like Lockheed Martin. But when we look at studies of jobs created by that military spending, it's actually a job reduction. You'd actually have more jobs through just not taxing working people and spending it on the military at all. And if the government puts money into education, infrastructure, research, energy, you get more jobs. These are, numerous studies from University of Massachusetts, other places. So the government does create jobs. It just does it in a way that results in fewer jobs in the world. And it could create jobs of a different sort if it weren't taking the majority of the money, of the discretionary budget every year, and dumping it into a war machine that doesn't get mentioned in most things, doesn't get mentioned in this book, doesn't exist in the political platform of a proposed new party.
Well, it does. It does, but indirectly. If you want to have a discussion with working people about greening America or cutting the military budget, you got to flip the conversation around. It's not convincing You can't say, look at a Massachusetts study, and if we move the money, from cut military spending and just reduce taxes or whatever, more jobs will be created. Maybe, maybe not. That's not guaranteeing anybody a job. If you flip it around and say the federal government is committed to making sure everybody has a job at a livable wage. If that actually happens, you can do all kinds of things. You can get rid of fossil fuel industry. You can cut down on refining jobs. You could massively retool the federal government, get the military budget. You can do those things because people are not scared to death that they're not going to have employment. Right now, if you pull the plug with a promise that there will be new jobs in the future, you're not going to be believed, and you leave the debate open to the warmongers and to the fossil fuel people saying, "Hey, these are great jobs. They're going to take them away from you." And we already have evidence in West Virginia that we put nothing in their place. We took away. It's not the military part of it, but we took away the coal industry there. We don't need it. It disappeared. Hillary Clinton said she was going to shut down even more, but nothing was put in its place in a credible way. It doesn't magically appear. So I would argue that you can bring working people to your side of this argument about military spending and greening by first proving that we are committed to jobs at a decent wage for everybody. If we can prove that to the American people, I think we could have a fantastic discussion led by you that would work.
Well,
People could see through it.
I'm 100% in favor of that and against eliminating any jobs without replacing them with better ones. But the polling is stronger on reducing the military budget than on the government guaranteeing jobs. The survey that you were so pleased with, the numbers are actually stronger among working
Well, you
people
know what?
right now.
We're going to do another. We're going to do another survey. This leads me into the where this kind of book's going. It's a good point you're raising. We're in discussions right now about doing a new survey that just concentrates on R20 districts, Republican districts where can never be a spoiler problem because the Democrats are basically dead. There's 130 congressional districts in the country where the Democrats lose by 25% or more. So we're going to try to isolate the survey on those districts that are sort of former industrial areas or mildly industrial, so that what we did this time could tell us something about what goes on in those areas. We could add a question, and I would like you to send me the question that you think will poll very well. We could add it because we're doing this thing called conjoint, where people are given each person in the survey. These are going to be in red areas. Are given 10 A/B agendas, and randomly these agendas change. And they choose candidate A. They're both independent candidates. They choose A or they choose B, and they get another list A, B, and it keeps rotating. And this is going to be 3,000 people times 10. That's 30,000 agendas that they're going to be evaluating. So we could add a question about military spending, cutting military spending. That would be wonderful. If you could send that to me. We have a meeting next Tuesday, actually. We're doing this with the Center for Working Class Politics.
Right.
They are masters at this polling business. And not YouGov, we have a different company we're using this time.
I will send you that this evening. And if anybody wants to give me suggestions on it in the chat, please go ahead and do so, and I will make use of them. There are also some good questions in the chat about political parties, but I wanted to ask first about what I thought was the idea that I liked the very best in this book. We have these two giant parties that are doing all this damage, and they seem to be uniting around gerrymandering, around creating these districts that you describe as just solid Republican or solid Democrat. And does that, as you say, really get rid of the spoiler problem? And if so, can we make use of that in general elections. There's no spoiler problem. We can run an actually good person in a general election without any bells or whistles or tricks or recounts. But if so, doesn't that already exist in primaries? And why has there been so little taking advantage of that possibility in primaries?
Well, very good question. And I think this is where it gets nuanced. That's always a good word to use if you're, uh, you know, on podcasts or something. But it actually, what we need to think about is two different strategies and two different sets of players for the where the Democratic gerrymandering as opposed to the red gerrymandering. So the primary strategy works beautifully in blue areas and even in purple areas, where so you can have very progressive candidates challenge in the Democratic primaries in New York and in, all kinds of Chicago and in the big urban areas and in some of the university town areas, but in the blue districts, and no harm, no foul, right? If the progressive loses, the Democrat's still going to win. So you're not giving the seat to the Republican, right? That's the spoiler means you're you're helping the Republicans. But it gets tricky when you move into the red districts. Because the problem in the red districts is it's not just that the Democrats aren't competing, they're dead. They are detested. You can't run as a Democrat in West Virginia, in Mingo County.
You run somebody good as a Republican.
You could, no, I don't think you want to do that. I think you want to run somebody as an independent, the way Dan Osborne is doing it in Nebraska, because you want to run against both parties, because that's the way to put your populist platform most clearly forward, saying neither party wants to is really producing the jobs that you need or producing the healthcare you need, et cetera, et cetera. So for Osborne to run successfully in Nebraska as an independent, he has to run as an independent. He can't run as a Democrat. Not because he wouldn't win the primary. He probably would. It's because this is what our survey was supposed to be about to begin with, the YouGov survey, which is we were testing 4 different kinds of platforms, from mild populist to strong populist. And we gave the same platform to an independent and to a Democrat. And we did it four different gradations. And it turned out, being a Democrat, all things being equal, you start 8 points behind. In Ohio, by the way, you start 16 points behind. Poor Sherrod Brown, running for the Senate in Ohio, has to start 16 points behind. And I found an interview with him where he understands why that's the case, because of NAFTA. He still gets NAFTA thrown in his face how many years later? Quarter century later? More. Thrown in his face when he goes around in Ohio. So if you want to, if it's crazy to carry the Democratic brand on your shoulders in a place in these red districts. Now, yeah. I hadn't really explored in detail what might happen if you ran in the Republican primaries, but the problem is you get blown out because most people in those states are going to be either Democrat or independent. Probably the majority or a plurality is going to be independent. Maybe Republicans might be a little bit larger. But running as an independent puts you outside of the duopoly. You can talk about billionaires, and you can go very old school populist from the 1880s and 1890s. Just to show you how wide open the terrain is. So as I mentioned to you, I was speaking at this Kansas City forum 2 nights ago, and so I did a little research. And by the way, it's on my Substack, and anybody wants to get my Substack's free, never charge you or anything. But I wanted to see what happened to the Democratic Party in the Great Plains states. And I looked Oklahoma all the way up to North Dakota. I included Iowa and Missouri, and I included Montana and Idaho. So there were 10 states. In 1990, right, during the end of the Reagan kind of period. 1990, the Democrats had 10 of the 18 senatorial seats. 10 of 18. Today they have zero. I then did a calculation, rough calculation. There's approximately 1,400 state legislative seats in those states. 1,400. The Democrats do not run candidates at all in 40% of them. No, so the party is dead. So if you're going to run as a Democrat, you're picking up this carcass and putting it on your back, taking all the bad vibes associated with it in those red areas where people feel, you know, they obviously were Democrats not that long ago, and they gave the new Democrats came in, starting with the Clinton administration. The populism went out the window. Legislation that supported small farmers and all that never happened. The factories closed, en masse. I don't have to tell you or the people
Yeah.
on this.
And now the Democrats write an autopsy on their latest presidential
Oh,
feat, in which they harken back to the grand old days of Clinton getting elected and Obama getting elected, as if the things they did after they got elected aren't impacting the Democrats now.
no, it's a tragedy. So anyway, to summarize that is the same group can't be the group that's being the progressives in the Democratic Party and being the new independents in the red areas, in the two gerrymandered areas, because to be in a Democratic primary, you're a Democrat, right? And to be in these red areas, you got to be an independent. So that's why you don't see uh, uh, Dan Osborne seeking out, AOC or Bernie, or seeking out the support of the Working Families Party or DSA. He's got to play a new game. And the problem that I'm confronting and that I'm trying to deal with as best I can is, how do you get a new game going in these red areas? What is it going to take to produce a new political organization? It's got to have a better name than Independent Workers Political Association. One of the things we'll be polling actually is a whole list of names to see which ones might be best. But I cannot start a new party. My organization's, a little smaller than yours. Not, we're not going to start a new party. Trade unions are going to have to fill that void. But to get from here to there, what we can do is promote a discussion, just like we're having here, and to do it everywhere possible. So we're about to launch at the end of this week, actually. We're going to announce a party of our own educational campaign. And it's going to have three things on it. We're going to start a podcast, and you're going to be invited to join us, party of our own podcast. We're going to revamp our runaway inequality curriculum so that it deals with political issues as well, which unions try to avoid. And the third thing is we're trying to get the book out as far as we can. All the proceeds from the book go back into this campaign. I'm not taking a penny. I'm old. I don't need the money right now. I need to get this going. So we can try to build an educational infrastructure. We need 1,000 of these discussions, 10,000 of these discussions. And then I think the void will be filled because people will start to feel more comfortable understanding what's going on, the issues, and getting out of the box that so many people are trapped in. You're not, but a lot of people are trapped in the box that it's not possible, right? You can't. Third parties never happen. They always fail. On and on and on. So they beat themselves before they even start trying. And we got to break through that fatalism and say, and this is my line to the No Kings people and the indivisible people and all the people that are fighting the good fights now. I'm saying, you can't stop authoritarianism in this country if you write off half the country. If you write off all the red areas and don't do anything there, you're not going to stop authoritarianism. You're just turning those people over to the demagogues. We've got to compete in those areas with something new.
So you made a great argument for an independent, right? And then you jumped to a party. Why not individuals running as independents? It sounded beautiful. Why the party? And if you're going to have the party, like not only what good is it going to do, what is it going to add to just running individuals, but what about the dozen or more third parties that exist right now, none of which acknowledge the existence of each other? You don't acknowledge the existence of any of
Yeah,
them.
no,
Someone's asking in the chat about the We the People party. I was going to ask you about the Green Party. Like, what is it about these parties that makes them not worthy of even acknowledging their existence? And what about the new third party is so different that it should not only be acknowledged to exist, but will succeed?
okay, you've got two questions there.
Yeah.
You've got one about why not just individuals running as independents. And that's kind of what Osborne's doing. He set up this working class heroes fund to try to encourage other working class people to run. So certainly a bunch of working class candidates running as an independent. Actually, I was at a workshop with the steelworkers, and this 30-year-old is running as an independent in Wyoming and thinks he's going to win, actually, for one of the state legislative seats. And we'll find out in a couple of months how he does. Uh, that's possible, and but it's hard to join a movement if it's just a series of individuals, and it's not clear that the individuals are going to have a coherent platform. So how, if you look at the People's Party of the 1880s and 1890s, or any of the Farm Labor Party that grew up became very, very powerful in Minnesota in the 1920s and 30s, there's a coherence. There's something you can join, something you can be part of wherever you are. And even if there's no independent candidate running in your area, you can support the ones elsewhere as a group. So there's some kind of coherence and discipline that could come from having a party. But you may get there just the way as you described it. Maybe the independents start running and then decide to get together and build something else. So why not these other parties? It's a great question. We're littered with them. What's missing are they're just not working class parties. What needs to be built is a party of and by working people, the people who have been, left out, left behind, the people who are responding to our surveys, the people in these who are responding to Dan Osborne. They they need to be the Green Party. If the Green Party could attract those people and have them, like, at least anything new that has to be built, 50% of the board of directors has got to be union representatives. Otherwise, you won't have the resources. The thing won't fly. We're a long way from that happening. I'm the first to admit it. We have a long way to go. But I think that has to be central to it. It's got to be grounded in working people. The good thing about trade unions are they're not self-selected organizations. In other words, it's a diversity of people that happen to be in a workplace. The employer does the hiring, not the union. So getting that group together means that you have to deal with all kinds of differences. And the word solidarity, the reason unions constantly use that word is not because people agree, it's because people learn how to get over their differences and come together. That's a powerful tool for building something new. But like I said, we're a long way from here to there. And I'd love to see the Working Families Party go into red areas and become, have unions, be the dominant force again. It's not. That's not who runs the Working Families Party. And that's not who runs the Green Party, from what I can tell. That's not how DSA is organized, and et cetera. So we have a lot of parties, but we don't have a party of and by working people. And that will happen only as a result of a lot of discussion, a lot of education. And I just saw a note, yes, I was involved in the Labor Party in the 1990s. And that was a great idea, but a little bit, it jumped too soon. We had something going on there. I don't know if you remember this, David. We had this thing called Labor Party advocates. And the idea was to get, modest, get like 100,000 dues paying members and then go to a convention. And you'd have lots of unions involved, et cetera. But what happened was in the 1990s, there was this new enthusiasm where Sweeney came in, took over the AFL-CIO. The old CIA people were kicked out. There were reform movements in various unions, and people thought, and they were so turned off by Clinton, they thought, okay, let's do it now. And Tony Mazzocchi, who was organizing all this, uh, and I was working with him very closely, and he got sort of pushed into going ahead. And it was kind of against his better judgment, so they had a convention, et cetera, et cetera. But he didn't want them to run candidates because he wanted to avoid the spoiler problem, and he wanted it to be actually he wanted to be it was like a precursor to the Tea Party. He wanted to be floating new ideas, organizing people, et cetera, et cetera. But it jumped too soon. And the people involved, all the people involved, couldn't understand what a party could do that didn't run candidates. So it had a couple of conventions. It survived for a bunch of years. And then when Ralph Nader ran for president, the late trade union movement blamed Nader for Gore's defeat, and they withdrew from the Labor Party. But it was the right idea. It was about I'd say 15 years too soon. We should have been building up Labor Party advocates, just a newsletter, bring people on board until we had at least 100,000 dues paying members, not 5,000. It was a learning experience. I have a chapter in the book on that. I have a chapter in the book on Working Families Party. But as David points out, I don't have a chapter on the other parties. And I probably should have, gone through all the smaller parties as well as DSA, because DSA is making a claim that they're the future. And I was on a panel with a DSA person 2 days ago, and I said, go into these red areas. We were out in Kansas City. I said, there's in Kansas, 3 of the 4 congressional districts, the Democrats lose by 25% or more. Go out there and have these conversations. See how socialism, democratic socialism flies there. See what happens. I think it would be a great learning experience for everybody involved. I'm not convinced it can fly there. I think you need something that's more grounded on economic populism and builds on those states were wildly populistic for generations, and it's not dead, it's just dormant.
I'm not sure they would accept the premise that they aren't grounded in economic populism, but maybe they would.
Well, no, to go talk to, they have to explain what they mean by socialism. It'd be a great conversation, but they can't just talk to, in urban areas and university towns, and amongst teachers unions and faculty unions, and they're gonna have to get out there and mix it up. I'd like to. I do a lot of work with the steelworkers, so that's a great group to talk. They're open. They'll talk to you, but you got to go out. You asked what my institute does. It was set up in 1975 to do political economy education for more conservative workers. The idea was to learn how to have these discussions. And we developed a non-lecture training technique. We learned how to train workers as their own trainers. And, it took us years and years to figure out how to do it. But, we spend all our time talking to people who don't agree with the left position, but who agree with a lot of the essential principles. So it's a great learning experience for us and I hope for the people involved. Now we got to do it again with party of our own educational campaign.
And in your experience, when a new party comes into a race where there have just been these two or one, is it a level playing field? Are you on the ballot? Are you in the debates? Are you in the media? Do you have to deal with working a lot of lawsuits and legal cases just
Yeah,
to?
I would try to avoid that for starters. I think ballot initiatives actually are a good organizing tool.
Sorry, you
One
would
of the
avoid
things we,
what?
sorry,
Sorry, you would avoid what?
I would try to avoid getting tangled in, lawsuits and ballot access and all that until you have you have a substantial number of people that are organized into a movement, into an organization. I don't think. I think you have to have a long time horizon, 10, 15-year horizon. My goal would be to get to the point where you could get enough working class candidates elected, first at the state level, and then maybe 5 or 10 congressional districts, so that you could have a congressional labor caucus, a working class caucus. In 1990, there was a populist caucus that came out of the Great Plains states. Had about 15 people in it. But to have 5 or 10, that could make a big you could have a lot of power in in the House if you had that number. But what you do to build it and how you maneuver. I was going to say ballot initiatives is one way to start attracting people. If you put we tested in this survey. There's a chapter on this as well on a proposal that again I made up. Based on some stuff I saw going on in Europe, that there should be that no corporation that gets government money as a contractor or as a subsidy should conduct involuntary layoffs. In other words, you don't take taxpayer money and then lay off taxpayers. All the layoffs would have to be voluntary based on financial incentives. Siemens in Germany, which has hundreds of thousands of employees, agreed with its union to this proposal. United States, when they laid off workers, the workers just lost their jobs. In Germany, nobody was forced to leave, and 5 facilities that they were going to shut down, they put a new product in and kept them open. So nobody was forced out, and that's what they do with top white collar employees all the time, right? You give them incentive, golden parachute, blah 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 blah, but workers just get tossed out. So we put that on a ballot initiative. It did very well, over 50%, and then we challenged it with the corporate attack, saying it was socialistic, it violated free market principles. We attacked it in 2 different directions, and support went down to 30 something. And then we counterattacked it by saying, hey, this is free enterprise. You're totally free to lay off workers, but not if you take government money. Then it's no longer a free enterprise. Then you got to play by these rules. Support went right back up again. But that kind of ballot initiative would open up a wonderful discussion, and you'd be able to mobilize people. You could see how you could have conversations with all kinds of people right now who wouldn't talk to you if you said you were a Democrat. So I think there's ways to move forward on this, but right now, what we knew is just open up the space and gather the kinds of good questions that are coming up here and elsewhere, and just promote the discussion, promote the dialogue. Unfortunately, many trade unions don't want to have discussions about politics because they're afraid their MAGA and non-MAGA people will fight each other and it'll divide the union and weaken the union. But this is one thing they'll agree on. They'll agree on we need a new party, and it would be a very healthy conversation. But I have to convince some labor leaders to open their doors to this. If anybody's listening, we'd love to come in and run a workshop on this and have members express their opinions about it.
It's another question in the chat, though. You've touched on this. What do you think about the Working Families Party?
Well, I think they're a good left Democratic Party operation. That they're working primarily in primaries, and they raise a lot of important working class issues. My critique is they're not a party of and by working people anymore. That they're pretty much run by professional activists, basically. They're very good at what they do. They raise a lot of money, but they don't work in red America. They aren't there. And my challenge to them is, if you want to prove me wrong on my critique, go out in these R25 districts where Republicans win by 25 points or more. It's 130 of them. Work there. See if people would be attracted to your party. Even in New York, where Zohran Mamdani is a member of Working Families Party and voted on the Working Families Party line. Only 7% of the voters voted on the Working Families Party line. So it's kind of like, they're Democrats. They're left Democrats. That's who they are. But prove me wrong. I'm challenging them. They've yet to respond to the challenge, but I'm especially it'll happen at some point. That's chapter 6, by the way, in the book.
If one of these 2 giant parties that we're stuck with right now were any good, we'd be okay, right? We wouldn't need a third one. And the fundamental reason why they're both so bad is legalized bribery, right? I mean, you look around the world, presidents and prime ministers are god awfully horrible. We're getting better popes these days. Why? Because when you elect the pope, there's no expensive television ads, there's no legalized bribery system, right?
You're the first person I've ever heard make that argument. That's fantastic.
So how do you create a third party that's going to compete with the two pro bribery parties and have it not become like them?
Well, look, that's, there's absolutely no guarantee, but we're so far from that that I don't, first of all, we're only going to be competing against one of them. Well, no, we're going to be competing against both of them, but we're going to be in an area where one is very strong and the other one is very, very weak.
But the
Uh,
one's going to have millions.
yeah, and but let's see what happens with Osborne. He ran 15 points better than Kamala Harris in the last. He still lost, but he ran 15 points better than she did in Nebraska. He's running for Senate. That's a big chunk. Might have been better had he a little less high profile if he ran for Congress. But he's going. He's going for the gold there. Let's see how he does. See what I hope will happen.
Will he say the few words that she won't? Will he say, "I don't want to arm a genocide"? Will he do that?
I don't know if that's an issue that's key in his race. I don't know.
It's an
He's willing to
issue
say a bunch.
that would have put her in the White House. The numbers are very clear. She'd be in the White House now if she had only said that. A number of other ways she could have got there too, but that was one of them.
Yeah, that was one of them. I don't know. I've never talked to him other than on a Zoom thing. So I didn't, and it was just, for 20 minutes. So I didn't get a chance to really grill him. It's a good question, and I think you should put it to him. I think somebody should put it to him. See what they say. Uh, he he's he's cautious about straying from sort of hardcore uh, populist economic issues, but I can't speak for him. I really can't. But the other thing I want to point out, though, if you did have some sort of new working class political organization, you would set up a competition with the Democrats, especially. They would start running more working class candidates. That's already happening a little bit. You've got your Graham Plattners, you got a fireman here, and an ex somebody. You're getting working class candidates slowly on the fringes of the Democratic Party, but you might get a whole bunch of them if they thought, oh my God, this is going to hurt us if we don't start to do it. There needs to be some serious competition. You stated perfectly. Gerrymandering has turned the country into two one-party states. Half the country's one party, the other half's the other party, and there's virtually no competition except when it comes to the presidential level.
We also have a problem with identity politics, right? You can run a person who grew up working class and they're of a particular ethnicity or race or gender, and that's it. They can be completely sold out, worst platform ever. They're going to destroy the world. You look at California. If Californians can't vote at least somewhat competently, what are we going to expect from Kansas, right? And in California, there's a working class guy who's taking money from every corporation, is going to destroy the state, and he's Latino. You got to vote for him. And there's a white, elderly male billionaire with a platform you couldn't dream of. Oh, well, you can't vote for him. He's not working class. So is it going to be about substance or is it going to be about identity?
Frankly, I don't think you can. I think working class people are much more inoculated against identity politics, period. That if the substance isn't there, uh, and it comes from uh, trade union experience. The reason I noticed there's a big difference between, for example, Osborne and Plattner. Osborne was a local union president and ran a successful strike. To run a strike, you can't, it's not about you as president. It's about holding your group together around a set of demands and principles and building solidarity every single day, or you're going to lose. Not just you personally, everybody's going to lose. And that creates a certain attitude. It's a vibe. It's something I pick up when I hear Osborne speak and when I see what he writes about. Plattner, good guy, good on tons of issues, but he doesn't have that same vibe. Yeah, well, maybe he's working class, maybe he's not, but he doesn't have that solidaristic vibe that I look for. And so I think if you had a working class organization and it had a lot of the union principles in it, but not 100% union, like 50% union, you would get candidates that not just were working class at some point, but talked working class. I mean, would you be supporting a billionaire? Frankly, I've got problems with that. Uh, not because I just wonder what planet a billionaire is on. You might say all the good things, and maybe that's what we need in California. But if I was building a local organization, I would not try to have the local millionaire be the working class candidate. I would find somebody else. And I've just met hundreds and hundreds of local trade union leaders that have been involved in strikes and organizations. They're pretty talented. You don't get to uh, hang on to your union position in democratic unions unless you've got something going for you. I was pretty impressed with Sean Fain at the UAW. We did a webinar with him. I've heard him speak to his own members. That's what I look for. How do they speak to their own members? And he's good. He's fights hard for them, and that's kind. I don't think we have to worry about sellouts right yet. I think we have to worry about uh, how to get people to open up their imaginations to think that there's a way out of this one party system that we have, and dominated by money and all that. And I think, look, there're going to be a lot of losses along the way. You're going to lose elections, but I think people. Uh, it was a lot worse in the 1880s and 1890s. I mean, the robber barons were even stronger. Uh, the oppression was, the inability of small farmers and working people to survive were enormous, and yet they were able to organize themselves into this mass movement and make a difference and actually curtail the power of billionaires. We're going to have to do something like that again, or we're going to, the big fear is we'll slide into authoritarianism as a better alternative than, I don't have a job or I don't have a stable job, and these other people are going to, through militarism or whatever, are going to give it to me. But I think we can beat that back, but we can't beat it back if we're going to write off half the country.
So you run these great candidates from a great party in these gerrymandered districts. Does this also work in districts in California and Washington where there's this, primary open to everybody and then a runoff?
It might, if it was areas that were uh, in conservative areas, it might work. You need conservative slash working class areas. I mean, what I'm looking at is uh, these areas that transform themselves. It's not like Orange County. We're talking uh, Mingo County, West Virginia, was enormously solid Democrat, and now it's completely red. So there's something there that I think uh, can be built upon. It's not the same as a Republican suburb, you know what I mean, of upper middle class people. I think that's a different uh, operation. So I don't know California and Washington well enough to say which congressional districts could fit this model of where something new could be built that makes sense, which red areas. And Western Washington, it's funny, I did a workshop on runaway inequality at a electrical workers union meeting in uh, Spokane, right? That's in Eastern Washington, right? Way in the east. And it was really cool. It went very well, but there was a raffle and it was for a handgun. It's like a different culture, but the progressive political economy really went over well. Also, I find it's sort of hard to believe. Just before COVID hit, I was invited to do my radical economics at the Teamsters convention in Las Vegas, introduced by Jimmy Hoffa Jr. And it went over really well. And then I did a workshop afterwards where there was standing room only and people were out in the halls. Not because I'm some charismatic guy, but because the content made sense to them, and they hadn't heard it before because it didn't come from political candidates weren't talking about this. Is pre-Bernie, et cetera. So I think there's possibilities, but I can tell you the counties that make sense. In the Midwest, the industrial and the Great Plains areas, you can spot them. You can see where the factories used to be, et cetera, and a lot of disappointed people around and small farmers struggling. You'll have to help me with California and Washington.
We'll try. Bill's out there. Maybe he can help
Yeah, I
later.
was just going to call on him actually, see if he
We
could help
got
us there.
with 5 minutes left in our hour here, Les Leopold. I read your book. We got you scheduled to be on here, and then Mr. Bezos came on my computer and helped me out by explaining that billionaires were not actually the problem at all. That you could tax him heavily, and it wouldn't help a single working person. That he was actually doing a great service to the rest of us by being a billionaire. Um, your response?
Oh, that one's simple. I want to tax on billionaires that will provide the uh, government jobs, employer of last resort. No problem. Put a 4 or 5% tax on him, and we'll create jobs right away, not trickle down. You go from capital centric, that's the argument he's making, that capital gets reinvested and this produces jobs, et cetera, to people centric. No, we're going to directly create jobs. Is there enough to do? Uh, I'll leave people with this. In our runaway inequality workshops, uh, we give each group, we have people working in groups of 4 and 5, we give them a big sheet of paper and we say, draw the world you'd like to see without runaway inequality. And they come up with all this amazing stuff: environment, education, healthcare. They create hundreds and thousands of jobs in their communities when they start doing this. There's so much that can be done. There's such a better world that could be produced if we just did it, as opposed to pretending that we have to kowtow to these billionaires. We're never going to get from here to there until we have a party of our own. So what I'd love people to do is get the book, review it someplace. I don't care if you hate it. Just get the discussion going out there. That will be the most productive thing we can do, is start getting a discussion going. I'm confident. I have faith in the American people that something new can be built. I'm actually, the survey made me optimistic. I never believed that 57% of people wanted something new. Only 18% opposed. The rest were unsure. We can build something, but it means getting a discussion going. And we need all the help we can get. And if there's any place you want me to show up, I'll do my best to be there.
Wonderful. The book is called The Billionaires Have Two Parties. We Need a Party of Our Own. Would certainly be nice. Les Leopold, thanks very, very much for writing the book and for coming to the book club. And everybody in the chat, thank you very, very much for being here. And thanks to Bill Lackamecker for helping out. And we'll be here next month.
Thanks so much for having me.